My sister kept stealing my food, so I destroyed our entire fridge. Vertical bar revenge, story vertical bar Reddit reading. When Jake's sister Mia keeps stealing his carefully prepped meals, he takes devastating revenge. Have you ever been pushed so far past your breaking point that you transformed from the rule follower into the rule breaker? When my sister Mia started stealing my carefully prepped meals and protein shakes, I tried doing things the right way until I realized sometimes justice requires getting your hands dirty. What began as innocent food theft escalated into a full-scale sibling war that would ultimately demolish our family's refrigerator and everything inside it. But sometimes, destruction is the only path to building something better. This is how I went from being the perfect son to orchestrating the most diabolical revenge our household has ever witnessed, and why it might have been the best decision I ever made. Stay until the end to discover how far I was willing to go to teach my sister that crossing boundaries comes with consequences no one saw coming. The day my sister stole my birthday cake was the moment I realized family rules mean nothing to those who refuse to follow them. I'm Jake, a 17-year-old fitness enthusiast from Columbus, Ohio, where our household runs on a system that most families would find peculiar but has kept the peace in our home for years. You see, my parents established what we call the name and claim policy when it comes to food in our fridge. Anything with your name on it is strictly off-limits to others. This system worked flawlessly until my 15-year-old sister Mia suddenly decided that my name labels were merely suggestions rather than boundaries. It started innocently enough, a missing protein bar here, a vanished yogurt there, but quickly escalated into a pattern that was sabotaging the careful meal planning I'd been using to prepare for my upcoming track season. Every missing item threw off my calorie counts and nutrient balance that I'd meticulously calculated. The frustration would build inside me like a pressure cooker each time I'd open the fridge door to find another empty container with my name mockingly scrawled across it. The worst part wasn't even the missing food, it was the look of smug satisfaction on Mia's face when I'd confront her. How she'd bat her eyelashes with fake innocence while chocolate protein smoothie residue still clung to the corner of her mouth. Prove it was me, she'd challenge, knowing our parents were too busy with their demanding jobs to referee our increasingly hostile food feuds. Little did she know, her casual disregard for my boundaries was about to awaken something in me that neither of us was prepared for. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Mia crossed the ultimate line. I had been saving up for weeks to buy this special limited edition protein powder from that fancy organic shop downtown. Chocolate peanut butter flavor, my absolute weakness. At $30 a container, it was a serious splurge. But I figured my upcoming track meet deserved a reward system that wouldn't completely wreck my training. 3 days. That's how long my precious protein powder lasted before I found it nearly empty, with barely enough for a half scoop remaining. My hands actually trembled with rage as I stood there, container in hand, staring at the pathetic dusting of powder clinging to the bottom. I marched straight to Mia's room and didn't even bother knocking. She was sprawled across her bed, scrolling through TikTok with her headphones on. "Did you seriously go through my entire protein powder?" I demanded, holding up the evidence. Mia pulled one earbud out and smirked. "Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. What are you going to do about it? Tattletale. Tell mom and dad I'm a big meanie who took your special powder?" She laughed, twirling a strand of hair. "Try it, and I'll just tell them you've been skipping school to go to the gym. See how that works out for your precious training schedule." My stomach dropped. She knew exactly where to hit me where it hurt. Still fuming, I took my case to mom and dad that evening during dinner. I laid out the evidence, pointed to the name labels, even calculated how much money I'd lost to Mia's thefts over the past month. Dad barely looked up from his work laptop. "Jake, don't be so dramatic. It's just food." "She's a growing girl," Mom added, passing Mia the potatoes with an indulgent smile. "You know how teenagers are with their appetites. We'll get you more protein powder this weekend." I sat there, fork suspended midair, absolutely dumbfounded. They weren't going to do anything. Not a single consequence for Mia. That night, lying in bed, I realized a devastating truth. If I wanted justice, I'd have to create it myself. That sleepless night changed something fundamental inside me. By morning, the helplessness had crystallized into something darker, more purposeful. Was I really about to do this? Deliberately set a trap for my own sister? The thought made my stomach twist with both guilt and anticipation. I'd always been the good kid, responsible, rule, following Jake, who coaches praised for his sportsmanship. But everyone has a breaking point, and Mia had tap danced all over mine. I found myself standing in front of our storage pantry later that afternoon, eyeing the expired goods my mom kept forgetting to toss out. There it was, a half-empty protein powder from last summer that had gotten wet and clumped up, growing those little white speckles that definitely weren't part of the original formula. Perfect. With careful precision, I transferred the expired powder into my empty premium container, adding just enough water to restore its original consistency. The smell was off, slightly sour, but not obvious enough to raise immediate suspicion. I labeled it clearly, Jake's, do not touch, and placed it prominently in the fridge next to Mia's favorite sparkling waters. Hey, I called out casually as I headed to the living room where Mia was watching her shows. Just got a new shipment of that protein powder, the chocolate peanut butter one. It's in the fridge, and I swear, Mia, if you touch it, I'm telling Mom about the dent in her car you're hiding. Her eyes narrowed, but I could see the wheels turning. I'd never threatened her before. This was new territory for both of us. Whatever, she muttered, turning back to her show. Not interested in your chalk powder anyway. But I knew better. I settled into the kitchen with my calculus homework, strategically positioned with a clear view of the refrigerator. 1 hour passed. Then another. My homework was long finished when I finally heard the fridge door open during a commercial break. Mia didn't even try to be subtle. She grabbed my container, made deliberate eye contact with me, and proceeded to mix herself a giant shake right there on the counter. Delicious. She taunted, taking a dramatic gulp. Thanks for the recommendation, bro. I kept my face carefully neutral, despite the thundering of my heart. No problem, sis. It took exactly 27 minutes. The bathroom door slammed so hard the family photos rattled on the hallway wall. The sounds that followed, well, let's just say justice has never been so satisfying, or so loud. The sweet taste of victory lasted exactly 14 hours. I woke to the sound of plastic clattering against tile. Bleary-eyed and confused, I stumbled into our kitchen to find Mia standing over the trash can, her expression cold as ice. At her feet lay the shattered remains of my meal prep containers. A week's worth of carefully portioned chicken, rice, and veggies that had taken me 3 hours to prepare yesterday. Consider us even, she spat, her voice still rough from yesterday's ordeal. I stood frozen, unable to process the devastation before me. Those containers represented more than just food. They were my discipline, my commitment, my control in a chaotic world. Now they were garbage, mixed with coffee grounds and yesterday's leftovers. You could have died from what I did, I whispered, part of me horrified at my own admission, another part desperate for her to understand the difference between our actions. This is just mean. Mia's laugh was bitter. Oh, please, I checked the pantry. I know exactly what you did. Mom's old expired protein powder? Gross, but hardly lethal. Stop being so dramatic. She pushed past me, shoulder checking me hard enough to make me stumble. By the way, you're not the only one who can play dirty. The kitchen fell silent as she stomped away, leaving me alone with the aftermath of her revenge. I knelt down, fingers trembling as I picked up a broken lid, the neat label with Tuesday's macros still perfectly intact. Hours of meal planning and preparation, gone. The chicken would spoil, the vegetables would wilt, and my carefully calculated nutrition plan for track season was now just another mess to clean up. Coach Stevens' words from yesterday's practice echoed in my head. Consistency is what separates champions from everyone else. Jake, what would he say if he saw me now? On my knees picking food scraps from between floor tiles? As I cleaned, a strange hollowness spread through my chest. This wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about something deeper breaking between Mia and me. When had we become these people who took joy in hurting each other? Last summer, we'd spent evenings shooting hoops in the driveway, laughing until Mom called us in for dinner. Now we were practically at war. I remembered Mia's 10th birthday, how she'd cried when her friends couldn't come because of a snowstorm. I'd built her a fort in the living room and played her favorite board games all day, even though I'd had plans with my own friends. The smile that had lit up her face was worth every sacrifice. Where had that connection gone? By the time I finished cleaning, my first period was already half over. I texted my friend Marcus to grab notes for me and headed to the shower, trying to wash away the sour feeling clinging to my skin. Maybe it was time to be the older, wiser sibling and let this ridiculous cycle of revenge end here. During my lunch break, I even drafted a text to Mia, an olive branch suggesting we talk things out after school. My finger hovered over the send button, a small spark of hope flickering that we could find our way back to being actual siblings instead of enemies. That's when I saw it, the Instagram notification. Mia, Rose tagged you in a post. Curious and cautiously optimistic, I opened the app. The hope evaporated instantly. There was Mia, surrounded by her giggling friends, posing next to our kitchen trash can with my destroyed meal prep visible in the background. The caption read, "When your control freak brother needs to learn who really runs this house. Number sibling wars, number got him." I scrolled to the comments, each one driving the knife deeper. You're savage girl. Bet he cried like a baby. Your brother sounds like such a loser." But what truly shattered me was the screenshots she'd shared in her stories. Private texts detailing how she'd gotten back at her psycho brother and planned to keep messing with his stupid diet until he breaks. Her friends were egging her on, suggesting even more ways to sabotage my food and training regimen. Something shifted inside me as I stared at my sister's smiling face, proud of her cruelty, validated by her friends' approval. The hurt crystallized into something colder, more calculating. I closed the app and deleted my unsent message of reconciliation. This wasn't about food anymore. It wasn't even about respect. This was now about consequences. And clearly, Mia had never faced any real ones in her life. As I walked to fifth period, a plan began forming in my mind. If she wanted war, I would give her one final battle, one that would ensure she never underestimated me again. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. In my case, it would be served rancid. The weekend dragged by with an artificial peace hanging over our house. I maintained a perfectly normal facade, running my usual routes, helping with yard work, even smiling at Mia across the dinner table. My parents seemed relieved that whatever tension had existed between us had apparently dissipated. If only they knew the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Monday afternoon presented the perfect opportunity. Mom was working late at the hospital, Dad had his weekly golf league, and Mia was at cheer practice until 6. I had exactly 2 hours to execute what I'd come to think of as Operation Refrigerator Apocalypse. Phase 1 began in our basement storage, where I unearthed the gallon of milk that had been forgotten behind Dad's homebrew equipment since Easter. The container had bloated to nearly twice its normal size, and even through the plastic, the smell made my eyes water. But this biological weapon was just the beginning. Next came the yogurt cups I'd hidden in my gym bag 3 days ago. In the warm darkness, they transformed into bubbling science experiments that reeked of decay. I'd also collected some cream cheese that had turned an alarming shade of green and several eggs that had passed their expiration date weeks ago. With surgical precision, I began my work. I didn't want to simply dump everything into the fridge. That would be too obvious, too easy to clean up. No, my approach was methodical and diabolical. I carefully opened every container in the refrigerator and added small, undetectable amounts of my rancid ingredients. A splash of spoiled milk in the orange juice. A smear of moldy cream cheese inside the butter compartment. Tiny bits of fermented yogurt mixed to condiments. The piece de resistance was the rotting egg mixture I prepared. I cracked them into a bowl, whisked them until they became a foul-smelling slurry, and then used a turkey baster to inject small amounts into sealed containers, the mayo, the pickle jar, even Mia's precious cold brew coffee concentrate. As I worked, a strange calm settled over me. Part of me was horrified at what I was doing. This wasn't just targeting Mia anymore. This would affect everyone. But a stronger part felt vindicated. Sometimes a system needs to completely collapse before it can be rebuilt properly. The final touch was to strategically dab the truly putrid milk behind the refrigerator coils and under the produce drawers, places that would be difficult to locate but would ensure the smell permeated everything. By the time I finished, my eyes were streaming from the stench, and I had to throw away the clothes I was wearing. I opened all the windows to air out the immediate smell, knowing it would build gradually as the concoctions mingled in the closed refrigerator. Just before Mia was due home, I went to my room, showered thoroughly, and waited. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. Had I gone too far? Probably. But sometimes extreme problems required extreme solutions. At exactly 6:17 p.m., I heard the front door slam, followed by the familiar rhythm of Mia dropping her cheer bag and heading straight to the kitchen, her post-practice snack routine as predictable as sunrise. The fridge door opened. 1 second passed. 2, 3. Oh my God, what is that smell? Her shriek could have shattered glass. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile before composing my features into innocent concern and heading downstairs. The scene in the kitchen was exactly as I'd anticipated. Mia stood frozen in horror, one hand clamped over her nose and mouth, the other still gripping the refrigerator door. The stench had grown even more powerful than when I'd left it. A toxic miasma of dairy gone wrong and putrefying protein. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning concern as I approached. The smell hit me like a physical force, and my eyes immediately began to water. Even knowing what was coming, it was worse than I'd expected. "Holy, what is that?" Mia turned to me, her face pale beneath her hand. Something's dead in the fridge," she gagged. I made a show of investigating, opening containers and grimacing. "Everything's contaminated," I announced, pulling out the orange juice she'd been about to pour. "Look, it's all separated and weird. And that milk," I lifted the regular milk carton, which I doctored heavily. "It's practically solid." By the time our parents arrived home 20 minutes later, Mia had moved from shock to continuous retching. The smell had permeated the entire first floor of the house. Dad's face contorted the moment he walked through the door. "What in God's name?" Mom didn't even finish her sentence, dropping her purse and rushing to open more windows. The family emergency that followed was exactly as I'd orchestrated. Every single item in the refrigerator had to be removed and examined. Each container opened released new waves of horrific odors. Mom actually cried when she realized her expensive face cream stored in the fridge door had been contaminated. Dad swore profusely when his craft beer collection proved tainted. All three of them looked at me with suspicion as we stood amidst the carnage of our family's food supply. "This is what happens," I said quietly, "when no one respects boundaries." The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. For 5 excruciating seconds, no one moved. Mom's face transitioned from confusion to shock to dawning comprehension. Dad's expression hardened, his jaw clenching in that way that usually preceded a serious punishment. Mia's eyes widened, darting between me and our parents, perhaps realizing for the first time that her actions had contributed to this disaster. "You did this?" Dad finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Deliberately?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes." "Have you lost your mind?" Mom's voice cracked with disbelief. "Do you have any idea how much food you've wasted? How much money this will cost us to replace everything?" I remained calm in the face of their growing anger. "Actually, I do. Approximately $372, based on our last grocery receipt. Which, coincidentally, is almost exactly what I've spent replacing my own food that kept disappearing over the last month." "This isn't about money, Jake," Dad started, but I cut him off. "You're right. It's not about money. It's about respect and consequences." I turned to face Mia directly. "It's about someone repeatedly ignoring clearly established boundaries and facing zero repercussions for it." Mia scoffed, though the effect was somewhat diminished by her still greenish complexion. "It was just food, Jake. Get over yourself." "Just food?" I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, showing them her post. "Was it just food when you destroyed my meal prep and bragged about it online? When you and your friends laughed about sabotaging my training diet? When you threatened to lie to Mom and Dad if I complained?" Mom took the phone, scrolling through the comments with growing horror. Dad read over her shoulder, his expression darkening further. "Mia, is this true?" he asked. For the first time, Mia looked genuinely uncomfortable. "It was just jokes," she mumbled. "Everyone exaggerates online." "But you did destroy Jake's prepared meals?" Mom pressed. "After he poisoned me," Mia protested. "With expired protein powder," I clarified. "Unpleasant, yes. Dangerous, no. You know what is dangerous? Messing with someone's nutritional intake when they're training intensively. Do you know what happens when an athlete's diet gets disrupted weeks before competition? Muscle loss, reduced endurance, increased injury risk." Dad sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Both of you, living room. Now, we need to have a serious family discussion." What followed was the most honest conversation our family had experienced in years. Seated around the coffee table, with the smell of rancid dairy still lingering despite the open windows, we finally addressed the deeper issues at play. "Jake," Mom began, her initial anger tempered now with concern, "what you did was completely unacceptable. You caused hundreds of dollars in damage and created a health hazard in our home." "I know," I admitted, "and I'm prepared to use my track meet prize money to replace everything." "That's not the point," Dad interjected. What bothers me most is that you felt this extreme action was your only recourse. Why didn't you come to us earlier, more insistently? I laughed without humor. I did. Multiple times. And what was your response? She's a growing girl. Don't be so dramatic. It's just food. I mimicked their dismissive tones perfectly. You invalidated my concerns until I felt invisible in my own home. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognition dawning in their eyes. And you? Dad turned to Mia, deliberately destroying your brother's prepared meals knowing how important they were to him, then publicly humiliating him online? That's not sibling rivalry. That's cruelty. Mia stared at her hands, the defiance slowly draining from her posture. I didn't think it was that big a deal. She whispered. Everyone's always telling me how perfect Jake is. Perfect grades, perfect athlete, perfect son. I just wanted to. I don't know. Take him down a peg. Her admission hung in the air, revealing insecurities I'd never suspected she harbored. That doesn't excuse your behavior, Mom said firmly, but it does help us understand it. The conversation continued long into the night, exposing fault lines in our family dynamic that had been ignored for too long. Mom admitted she'd been too overwhelmed with work to properly mediate our conflicts. Dad acknowledged he'd been unfairly lenient with Mia while holding me to higher standards. I recognized that my obsession with control had sometimes made me rigid and unsympathetic. And Mia, reluctantly at first, but then with growing honesty, confronted her jealousy in the ways she'd channeled it destructively. By midnight, exhausted but somehow lighter, we drafted what Dad jokingly called the Columbus Refrigerator Treaty of 2024, a comprehensive set of house rules that acknowledged everyone's needs and established clear consequences for violations. Some terms were practical. A shared digital grocery list, color-coded storage containers, designated shelf spaces. Others addressed the deeper issues, weekly family check-ins, no social media posting about family conflicts, a commitment to actually listen when someone expressed concern. The next morning, we all pitched in to disinfect the refrigerator, a disgusting but oddly bonding experience. As Mia and I scrubbed side by side, she nudged me with her elbow. That was seriously diabolical. What you did, she said, a reluctant admiration in her voice. I never would have thought you had it in you. I learned from the best, I replied, surprising myself with the genuine half-smile I offered her. You're a worthy opponent, even if you are a food thief. She rolled her eyes but returned the smile. Yeah, well, don't expect me to go easy on you just because we've called a truce. I'll still crush you at family game night. In your dreams. I shot back, feeling a spark of the sibling relationship we'd once had, competitive yet affectionate. Later that evening, as I reorganized my newly respected food shelf in our sparkling clean refrigerator, I reflected on what this bizarre war had taught me. Sometimes, the most destructive actions can lead to the most constructive outcomes. Sometimes, you have to break a system completely to rebuild it properly. And sometimes, the people who push you to your absolute limits are the ones who help you discover just how far you're willing to go to stand up for yourself. For better or worse. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not sorry either. In our house, boundaries matter now. And sometimes, that's worth making a stink about. Looking back at the refrigerator catastrophe that nearly tore our family apart, I can't help but smile at how something so disgusting led to something so necessary. Before my revenge plot, I was invisible in my own home, boundaries trampled, my concerns dismissed. But sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made with words, but with actions that can't be ignored. What I learned through this mess is that respect isn't freely given, sometimes it must be forcefully earned. While I don't recommend biological warfare with dairy products as your first option, I do believe that standing up for yourself is never wrong, even when your methods are questionable. Our family now communicates honestly, respects each other's space, and most importantly, keeps their hands off food that isn't theirs. The Columbus Refrigerator Treaty still hangs on our fridge door as a reminder that every relationship needs clear boundaries and real consequences. Mia and I have found our way back to being siblings instead of enemies. Though she still checks everything carefully before eating it, some lessons stick better than others. If you've ever felt powerless in your own life, remember my story. Sometimes you need to create a little chaos to restore order. The right to be respected isn't petty, it's essential. If this story of sibling warfare and refrigerator sabotage resonated with you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments about the most creative revenge you've ever taken. Subscribe for more real-life stories where I share the messy, complicated, Sometimes smelly truth about family dynamics, and the links will go to protect what matters. Next week's story involves a drone, my neighbor's prized rose bushes, and a valuable lesson about privacy fences. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.